I earlier asked you, can you change? Now I'm asking you, will you change?
This is where I tend to disagree with a lot of vegans when it comes to this particular point.
Physically abusing them is wrong, of course, but in terms of diet,
Can there be any situation where you think violence can be justified? Context of this discussion, I'll define violence. So it is essentially causing harm to someone through physical force or even threat of force. And there are broadly 4 different types of violence. For example, physical violence, emotional violence, sexual violence, and systematic violence.
It can be any situation. I don't think violence is acceptable anywhere.
Maybe in case of a criminal, when they subject them to violence to
To stop them from.
it, yeah, maybe.
I don't think anyone should start. But if you're getting abused and you feel like you're like cornered,
Yeah, then probably it's justified.
probably it's justified. Only, and there are also levels like how much you can go.
True. So you're essentially saying self-defense, and in that there are nuances depending on the situation.
I don't think violence is justifiable. I think there are other ways you can cope up with the situation rather than violence. So I don't think violence is a good thing.
There are 2 stakeholders when we talk of violence broadly. One is the perpetrator and the other is the victim. So do you think some non-humans like dogs can also be victims of violence?
Of course.
recently there has been a lot of increase in people raping dogs and they're sexually abusing dogs. Especially, there's not much in Bangalore, but in Delhi and Gurgaon and that size, it's increased by a lot.
Then do you think we as humans cause violence to all the other animals, for example chickens?
Yes.
Hens, cows, pigs. Yeah.
Definitely. I agree.
And do you think we as humans participate in that violence?
Yes. Mostly it's humans. Yeah.
Yeah, it is humans. They do.
Then do you think that if dogs can be victimized, then there are other animals like chickens can also be victimized?
Yeah, of course I do. I am. Okay, yeah. Of course I do, yeah.
No, you can complete that statement. I am.
I'm not 100% vegan, but I was vegan for a year.
Okay.
And it still bothers me a lot. Like just today, I was telling my friend that I saw this truck full of sheep, and they did not even have space to sit properly, and they were just, they didn't know what's going on, and I knew that they were going to the slaughterhouse, and it really bothered me. So I am really against violence against animals, especially taking their lives. I'm a vegetarian now. I wouldn't call myself a vegan because I have desserts with egg sometimes in them, or desserts with milk in them, animal milk in them. But I'm all for it, and I'm towards that already because this has been bothering me for many years.
It's very rare case, but I don't think it's acceptable. As we are humans and they're also they have their own life. Yeah.
True. And those are the rare cases, and of course they are not acceptable like you said. But if I keep aside the rare cases and if I talk about cases which are more present in our society, for example, hens or chickens that we humans consume, do you think they are also subjected to pain and suffering?
At one point of time, in the world, every organism is dependent on another organism. We all know about the food chain. But I'm vegetarian, but I don't know about, I'm not against it.
If you look at it that way, well, yes, we do. That doesn't mean you completely stop eating them or consuming them, or physically abusing them is wrong, of course. But in terms of diet, I don't think so.
You want to add something to?
No. It's like
But as a listener,
It's it's how it's a web, like the food web. That's how it works. So you can't tell someone to completely stop it or something like that. But it's just how
a
the
number,
web works.
a lot. It's like balancing just because few people are eating, and it's not like everyone is eating. Only non-vegetarians are eating. There's a lot of vegan people and vegetarians.
are you a vegan?
I'm a vegetarian. I'm not vegan.
Are you a non-vegetarian?
No, I'm vegetarian.
You said you were vegan for a year. So if I may ask, what prompted you or what triggered you to try veganism?
So it was actually during COVID. Can you bring the mic up a little? Yeah. So it was during COVID, and basically it was during COVID, and I had a lot of time then. Obviously we were all stuck at home, quarantine, and I was just watching a lot of videos. First, it started with, they said that COVID started with the bats and stuff, right? So I was just understanding the psychology of why has COVID started, and I felt like it's Mother Nature protesting, actually. I felt it was like, you know, animals are giving us virus, but what are we doing to them that they're giving us a virus, you know? That was the first thought that came, and I watched a lot of videos. There's a famous vegan on YouTube. There's a vegan activist on YouTube. His name I forgot. I remember his face.
Is he from India?
No, he's not from India. He's very, very famous though.
He has long hairs?
Yes.
Earthling Ed.
Huh?
Earthling Ed.
Earthling Ed, exactly. Earthling Ed. So I watched Earthling Ed, and I watched a bunch of other vegan videos about veganism and videos about animal cruelty, and I could totally resonate. I was already resonating. I was just not wanting to be a vegan. But by then I felt the timing was very ripe, and it was already like 3 months. So I was like, I am now going to become a vegan for sure. And that was just around my birthday time. So I became a vegan at that time. Yeah.
And then why did you start consuming animal-derived products?
So I sometimes consume desserts. It's mainly like I have a weakness for desserts, and the main reason was I was not able to find a lot of vegan options where I live.
If we know that our food choices, or in general our other choices, is inflicting violence on these innocent animals, then don't you think it's our responsibility to change that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
How about you?
I actually don't know what to say about that. Because, I mean, humans do consume animals. I think it's just a part of life. But yeah, like, it does make sense. Like, you're not supposed to harm animals. So I really don't have like a proper say for this. So it's like a very confusing situation for me.
But earlier when we talked about defending violence or justifying violence, then we did not include the argument of food chain or food web. But now when we see that, okay, there can be victims who have been essentially victimized for so long, so we are kind of giving that excuse that they are being...
Yeah, I mean, in terms, I mean, for animals, you can justify that it's just like I said, the food web or the food chain. You can justify in that way that we're eating them because it's just how the world works. But
the world works because individuals like us choose certain options in our life. Right. And she already mentioned about vegans. I think one of the tenets of veganism is to stop, or the only tenet of veganism is to stop animal use and abuse. And that's not like an option we don't have. Not abusing a chicken is an option that we have, right? I totally get it's confusing because on one side we are against violence, that is we are talking about peace, and then our action says otherwise, right? So our values, our actions are not aligned, and hence that confusion, and it's called dissonance for these animals. We don't talk about it as a society, we are ignorant about this issue. But when we do talk about it, it creates that kind of confusion, right? Yeah. Do you think we should change? If we acknowledge this, then don't you think we should change from our side?
Yes, we can, but I don't think it'll like happen instantly. I think it'll take like a really long time.
Maybe take decades or so. Yeah. But what can happen instantaneously or relatively in a shorter duration of time is for individuals like us who can change. Do you think you as an individual can change?
Yeah, I mean, it is possible. Like, yeah, I can.
And since you guys are vegetarian, or since you folks are vegetarian, I'm trying to do away with the term guys to be gender neutral. So since you folks are vegetarians, I'll talk more about dairy animals, right? Because even they are subjected to all the forms of violence which I talked about earlier. Sexual violence, systematic violence, emotional violence, and physical violence. I talked about the relationship between a perpetrator and a victim. In their case, we are the perpetrator. Don't you think so?
We are, but that, like I said, there's no way to justify that for them. Like humans can justify that we are abusing animals. There's no way for animals to tell us that they're being abused.
Yeah, but we know that they are screaming in their own language.
Yeah, well.
We are just trying to be ignorant, right? When, for example, in the Indian dairy industry, it's very common to artificially inseminate, right? They don't mate with the bull to get pregnant.
Yeah.
If you see any video of artificial insemination with a little bit of honesty and intuition, you know that they are screaming, right?
Yes, we do. And
so what's going on in your mind right now? I know it's a very different world view that suddenly dropped on you?
No, it was always there, but I never wanted to like think about it because
True. I know. And that's perfectly normal, by the way, because it's not a subject that's talked about very often, right? And like you said, it's always there, but we choose to be ignorant about it. And the society works well because no one is judging us or questioning us. Everyone is a perpetrator in that sense, so no one is talking about it. It's so refreshing to talk to someone who knows about Earthling Ed, and then also you tried veganism, so that's also really nice and motivating for me to hear this. So a couple of things on that. First, on veganism. So what you tried was the diet aspect of veganism. So veganism is more of a social justice movement. Yeah. So it's not like sometimes we can be a vegan and sometimes we can't be a vegan. I'm sure that you want to be a vegan, but you're not a vegan yet, and I'm very hopeful that in the future you will be a vegan.
So, yeah, exactly. So many times I try to get back to a complete. The reason I became a vegan is not for the diet, it was for the animals itself. So it's the social aspect was what came to me first because it was bothering me so much. The diet thing was a side benefit because you feel lighter when you eat vegan, and you know, it's just the only places I slip up is when there's less of options, and sometimes where it becomes like extreme work to be like make my coffee this way, make my pizza this way, or like that's where it becomes a little hard for me. And I had an issue with being so particular with everything, which I know that that's not the point of veganism. I get it. So that's where I felt like was becoming hard for me. But I'm still, I would be happy to go back to it. I still consume, so I consume good milk every day. Yeah, I'm doing all those things. I have curds, I have vegan ghee, vegan curds. So I would not call myself vegan because I'm not strictly a vegan. But I know that I'm on that path somewhere.
Next time, whenever that thought comes up, just think from the victim's perspective. I know it is tough sometimes, especially in our initial days, but then I used to ask this question to myself, that's what is tougher? That whether me fighting this craving for this specific dessert, is that tougher? Or that animal who was sexually exploited and eventually killed for that dessert, right?
So this is where I tend to disagree with a lot of vegans when it comes to this particular point. Is yes, I know that dairy also involves animal abuse, and obviously they're impregnating them. There's a lot of stuff happening, the way the conditions that they're kept and stuff. So I have a slight gray area when it comes to dairy because I don't feel like it's a violence that is happening against animals when we're having the dairy products. But I wouldn't say you murdered a cow for a dessert, or I would not be eating that.
They are physically abused, they are sexually abused, they are emotionally abused, and they are systematically abused, right? So it doesn't make a difference if I'm a vegetarian or non-vegetarian. In fact, I tell people that if you are vegetarian for ethical reasons, then might as well start consuming beef. What I'll do is I'll take a minute to explain the Indian dairy industry, and then I'll leave you to decide.
I know already, but please refresh.
When does a mammal gives milk? Like any mammal, female mammal, when does she give milk?
after birth,
After birth, and who's that milk for?
the baby.
The baby. So that's like the first cue itself there, that the milk is not made for us. That's the first thing. One thing you already talked about, artificial insemination, that is one issue. That is sexual exploitation, if you see that, yeah?
That's why I don't drink the milk.
Yeah, and secondly, they are subjected to constant cycles of pregnancy. As humans, we would not want to be impregnated more than twice or thrice in our whole life. At least from all the girls in my life, whoever I have talked to, they have this opinion that it's, and the boys as well, like I would not want any of my loved ones to go through so many cycles of pregnancy because it's physically and emotionally traumatic, right? But if you think about it, the dairy farmers, it makes only sense if they are subjected to constant cycles of pregnancy. If there is no pregnancy, means there's no milk. If there is no milk, means in business sense there's no production, no business. And now let's talk about the killing part, right? What is the product of pregnancy? It's going to be an infant, right?
Like the calf, you mean? Yeah.
So can you take a guess what's happening to the male calves?
Yeah, I think they're killed. But in the Indian dairy industry also they're killed? Really?
Yeah. And before that, what do you think is happening to the retired mothers who can't give milk anymore?
Retired mothers who...
As in those who can't give, retired is the industry term used in the dairy industry.
But is this happening in Bangalore as well? Is this
Yeah. I'll come to the specifics of what's happening in India. But would you like to take a guess what's happening to them?
They're also killed.
So if I say this, that in India also cows or the buffaloes are killed, then someone can directly question me, if they are killed, what are they killed for? The logical answer is beef, right? But if I say beef, then you can question me that in India not everyone is consuming beef, but everyone is consuming dairy products, right? So you can check on Google. India happens to be one of the largest beef and leather exporters in the world.
Okay.
So this is a misconception that people think that in India dairy animals are not killed. The origin of that misconception is the religious value that people see in cows. What people don't know is that 75% of the milk that we consume is not coming from the indigenous cows. They are coming from Jersey cows or from buffaloes. And there is no restriction on killing of buffaloes and these hybrid cows.
So my question is it like together that, with the dairy industry, so the dairy part is, you have the female cows, and then they make sure the calves and the male cows and then the retired female cows
They are sent to the slaughter.
are sent to the slaughterhouse. So it's a together. It's a business that happens together.
It's like a one supply chain. Milk is being extracted at the beginning of the supply chain, beef at the end of the supply chain. And the conclusion is that if someone is a vegetarian for animal ethics reason, then they are living in ignorance, denial and ignorance, because then if you are consuming dairy products, you might as well consume beef because it's the same supply chain. So coming back to the earlier question, do you believe that this is violence and we are causing it?
That's a tough question to answer.
The question is easier. The toughness comes from the fact that we have been doing it for a very long time.
If you look at it from a moral standpoint, yes, it is wrong.
That's the only standpoint that I'm looking at right now.
In
And
that
that's,
standpoint,
and that's
it
the
is
only
wrong.
standpoint which will force us to change, right?
It is wrong in that sense.
Yeah.
And the only way to stop it is, like I said, you'll either have to stop them forcefully, which, well, we'll have to do it either way. If you're looking from a smaller standpoint, we'll have to stop, forceful production of milk or anything else. Then,
But that will only stop, like, the simpler way, like if all of us suddenly decide to go vegan, that is stop drinking milk, then the business will die. They will not be forced to this traumatic experience.
I think there is no cure to this, but only you can contain it to a certain extent. So, like, you cannot stop everybody from, like,
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm talking to you two here. My aim for the day is encourage
general-
or inspire you
Right.
to change. Of course, I know the world will not change overnight. I'm just here to talk to open-minded people who are rational and at the same time are pro-justice and see this as an injustice, and then if they realize that this is wrong on our behalf, then we should stop it.
if you ask me personally, well, I am a vegetarian, so I don't consume at least non-vegetarian products. But as for milk and like other dairy products, I mean, to encourage veganism, we can stop eating. For me, I can stop eating. I can stop eating
Yeah.
dairy products, and to
that's-
support.
yeah.
That's how you begin, right?
Do you think we as individuals can change?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
If we have a will to, then yes, obviously we can. And an open mind.
True. That's very true. You talked about will, which comes from a place of empathy, where we think from the victim's perspective, and then you talked about the mind, open-mindedness, that is essentially to process information in a logical way. I earlier asked you, can you change? Now I'm asking you, will you change?
We will try like our best because it will be hard, but we'll baby steps. We'll take baby steps and it'll be possible.
And do you know of people who have actually made those change in their life? You would have heard of this term vegans. Do you know?
I do have some friends who are like vegan, like yeah.
This is something that it used to bother me, but I never saw videos of India particular. So that's where you end up thinking that it's okay to have dairy in Bangalore or India because we don't have those videos that explain this. But when you see most of the videos are, they're based abroad, and that system is disgusting. And you're like, oh, that, but the Indian system is not as disgusting. So, yeah.
That's why you follow Earthling Ed, who's a Western activist. So you should also follow some Indian activists who talk about this, myself included. Yeah, and I'll let you know of 3 documentaries on YouTube which talks about the Indian dairy industry. One I already said, Maa Ka Doodh. Other is Unholy Cattle of India. Third is The Land of Ahimsa. And I'll share the resource cards. Yeah. And I used to. So I'll tell a little bit about myself. So I'm Shivam. I was a non-vegetarian and I became vegetarian for animal ethics. And I was someone who believed that the dairy industry is cruel only in the West, not in India. And then someone challenged me, and I'm someone who's very hands-on. So I started visiting dairy farms in Bangalore and in my hometown, that is Lucknow. And I realized that it's as cruel. I made videos in the dairy farm to share that with the world. I thought it's not happening, but it is.
It's important to make the videos in the dairy farms. Then when they actually see it, they're like, oh, ye to India mein hota hai, and then the conversion can happen faster.
Then I sincerely hope that you reflect on this. You're already aligned on the moral values. You just have to align your actions accordingly. And I mean, like you said, then you can also join us here. If you value peace, if you value empathy, then going vegan is the logical conclusion.
I absolutely agree, and my ideal would be to be a vegan itself. Because I was there, and I would like to go back to that level. Because that's where you're completely being authentic to your own ethics.
True.
Instead of being like, yeah, there. But yeah, so I'm happy to have had this conversation.
Make it simple for us to just think from the victim's perspective, right? Because nothing can be as important to us as their life is to them.
True. I mean, you have to put them in their shoes. You have to put yourself in their shoes to understand what they feel about.
Be the change you wish to see in the world.